The timeline of the night in question is critical. Where was Mr. X on the night of? I would like to think that if he were questioned numerous times and given a polygraph, the police looked into his whereabouts that night.
It's 115 degrees in the shade today in West Tennessee. Okay, I'm exaggerating, but not by much. The temperature gauge on my car is holding steady at 100, and my AC is on the fritz. I stopped to get a much-needed haircut, so I will at least be somewhat presentable for a meeting that I'm headed to. I might be drenched in sweat, but my hair will look good, right? That was my reasoning anyway. It seemed like a good idea at the time. I wanted to make a good first impression at this meeting. I needed to have anything I could find working in my favor for this appointment. With whom am I meeting, you ask? Why is this so important? Well, it's important because this person doesn't even know that I'm showing up at his house. And what I'm about to ask him is not your everyday fare. He might have a piece of paper that contains a dying man's account of what happened to CAYCE LYNN MCDANIEL. A piece of paper that he doesn't even know that he possesses. I obtained an address for this man, but no working phone number. So it might be hot as hell outside, but I'm going in cold.
This is going to be the weirdest thing anybody's probably come to you with. I'm Brandon Barnett. I'm doing an investigative thing on CAYCE McDaniel. Has the cops ever come to you about a briefcase that you've got?
No. I'm Brandon Barnett, and this is Searching for Ghosts. Hey everybody, and welcome to Searching for Ghosts on YouTube. This is Season 1 Revisited, The Disappearance of CAYCE LYNN MCDANIEL. This is Episode 12. Beech Lake and a briefcase. I'm gonna do things a little differently. This one, I gave you a little bit of a teaser to start it out. I'm gonna play most of this one, and then I'm gonna do commentary on the back end of it. You have to wear many hats in doing when you do everything yourself. So, I mean, most importantly is, you're trying to get to the truth, right? You're trying to be an investigator, which admittedly is not anything I really have any experience in. I've done a little bit of reporting for newspapers, but they were fluff pieces, It was mainly about music and, stuff like that. But you have to be a storyteller. You have to be a narrator. That's how I got into voice work, was starting doing this stuff. I'm producing everything. I'm playing all the music in it. Not going to lie, there are, as much work as it is to put these together, I get a lot of satisfaction. The creative side of me gets a lot of satisfaction out of doing these because I have to do everything, right? And minus, the help that I've had throughout, I don't know, like I've done everything alone, especially with investigating. And my sister used to make the cover art for all especially on Bethany season. But, as far as like the meat and potatoes of what this thing is, there was nothing, and then now there's something, and I had to produce pretty much all that. So, this is one of the most frustrating, and you can hear it. You'll hear me in it. I am frustrated. I am so frustrated. But this is one of my favorite episodes from a creative standpoint. It comes off like Serial, the podcast Serial was the first season, was the kind of the impetus for me starting all this. I loved it. It's so entertaining, and
mysterious, and well done, right? This one is one of my favorite episodes. This reminds me of a Serial episode. You know, it's got me out in the field, me going to a guy's house and all this stuff. But as far as like why I was doing this pissed me off. So once I figured out what this was, this made me so angry because it ended up being I told you Mark Burns was coming back. This ended up being another Mark Burns. Let me just cut this thing here because I'll get into it on the back end of this clip. Yeah, I don't know. I simultaneously hate and love this episode at the same time. Anyway, check this out and I'll be back.
I guess I should go back and explain how I ended up on this man's front porch. In going through old newspaper articles, I found something that I'd never noticed before. It was a statement from then lead investigator Jerry Hartsfield. From the May 26, 1997 edition of the Jackson Sun. Quote, "There's a witness," Hartsfield said. "Somebody here in Milan knows. She knows but won't step forward." Hartsfield has spoken to the woman once, when she telephoned police anonymously. He believes she lives in Milan, but has not had contact with her since. Unquote. Hartsfield, now retired, is the only member of law enforcement, former or current, who will speak to me. He now resides in Canada, and is always willing to talk when I call. But after 21 years, his memory is not the best. And this anonymous tip was made just 9 months after Casey went missing.
You got a woman that you thought was in Milan, an anonymous call, and she said she knew, I don't know if she was a witness, I think that's the word you use, witness, but she would never come forward, and I don't think you ever heard from her again. I'm just wondering what information, because the way the article read, you were sure she had some good information. I'd like to smoke her out if that was real, if you could remember anything about that.
So I was surprised when he immediately started giving me details on this call. He even told me who the caller was and how to find her. Then I realized that this wasn't the same call mentioned in the 1997 newspaper article. He stated that this was a more recent phone call that he had received after moving to Canada. She contacted Hartsfield because she said she didn't trust anyone down here. This is something that I hear quite often. In this case, with all the rumors that fly around, trust issues are of epidemic proportions. I know. I have them too.
She knew what happened to Casey, and she didn't know. She held it back, and she never revealed it. And she should have told me before. And I told her, why hadn't you come forward before? And she said, I didn't know who to trust down there. And I saw your stepdaughter, and I got your phone number. And she called me up here.
Hartsfield indicated that he immediately contacted Gibson County Sheriff Paul Thomas and gave him this information.
And then I called Paul. Paul was in Nashville. That's before he took office. And I called Paul and gave him the information, but I never heard anything back from Paul.
Huh.
And Paul,
I got really excited because Hartsfield stated that this tip was concerning Mr. Y, not Mr. X.
There was something about Pete.
Okay.
Of course, I know Pete probably had a lot of friends, a lot of new people in that circle.
Yeah. So I tracked down this tipster and give her a call. It's always awkward trying to explain what it is that I do. The word is getting out, but we still have to explain what a podcast is to many people that we talk to. But once I mentioned Casey's name, she turned down the blaring television and proceeded to tell me everything she knew. So here's the rundown. In 2006, she was visiting her former husband in prison in Arkansas. He told her a story and stated that if anything ever happened to him, she needed to tell it. He stated that Mark Burns, Mr. X, had admitted to him and Cindy's sister at Beech Lake in Lexington, Tennessee, that Burns had raped Casey and later strangled her after she threatened to tell. Burns allegedly disposed of her body on this man's property, where roofing shingles were reportedly dumped. According to my source, the asphalt in the shingles makes the body more difficult to detect. My source's former husband allegedly told her this in June or July of 2006. By February of 2007, he had succumbed to lung cancer. He evidently knew of his diagnosis when he told the story to my source, but he never told her that he was ill. My source claims that she also saw this account written on the back of a document that was in a briefcase. This briefcase and other belongings were picked up by the deceased man's brother after he passed. His brother is the man who I dropped in on, unannounced. When I showed up at the brother's house, it became obvious that this was the first time he had heard this information about the briefcase. The shirtless older man reached behind him to find something to sit on as he was processing what I was telling him. He stared at the ground the entire time with a confused look on his face. You could tell that he was racking his brain, trying to remember anything from that briefcase. I didn't give him any details about what was written down, other than it explained what had happened to Casey. He stated that he had gone through everything in that briefcase and didn't remember mention of CAYCE McDANIEL. I explained to him that I was told that it was randomly written on the back of an unrelated document. He then told me, quote, "Man, I don't even know if I still have that shit," unquote. I was feeling pretty guilty for just showing up and dropping this bombshell on him. Again, it was sweltering outside, so I wanted to let him get back inside his house. I started walking toward my car, telling him that I would let him go, but that I would write down my number in case he did find the briefcase.
Well, if you want me, just leave my number with you, and if you happen to, like I said, if there's nothing in there, that's one more rumor I can put to bed.
Yeah.
Let me find something to write on. I'll give you my number and my name. Got something out in the car, I'm sure.
As I was walking back to give him my number, he said, quote, "I'll tell you what my brother told me about what happened to that girl," unquote. Then he basically told me the same thing that was allegedly written down and filed away in that briefcase. So just when I think we're starting to close in on this thing and are getting away from some of the outlandish sounding stories about Mr. X, we're right back where we started. I have 2 verbal accounts concerning Mr. X from this deceased man's ex-wife and his brother. And it's one thing to tell people a story about what happened to Casey. Those are a dime a dozen. But it's another thing to write it down on a piece of paper when you know that you're terminally ill. So without the handwritten documentation, there is one more witness to this alleged confession from Mr. X who could either substantiate or refute everything I've been told. Cindy's sister. And I had been in communication with her early on in this podcast. She has spoken to me off the record in the past. She was even trying to connect me with Cindy at one time. But the communications from her have slowed to a trickle in recent months. So I sent her a text asking if she would be willing to talk to me about this man. I didn't give her any details except the man's name. She said that she would be willing to talk to me that afternoon. After leaving Milan, I texted her asking if she were available to talk. I got no response. I gave her 2 hours and then called her.
This is
Nothing.
Brandon Barnett.
I left a
You can
voicemail.
reach me at 7.
It's been 3 days and I haven't heard back.
Thank you. Bye.
In our off-the-record conversations in the past, she has indicated that it was her opinion that anyone looking into Mr. X was, quote, barking up the wrong tree, unquote. And this is why I was shocked to hear her name mentioned as a witness. And of all the people that I've tracked down involving the briefcase after reading that one passage in the Jackson Sun, I figured that she would have been the first one to talk to me. And now, she's the lone holdout. And this is why this case has stagnated for 21 years. People not coming forward with vital information is why these rumors continue to cloud the facts in this case. If Mr. X had nothing to do with this, I want to clear this mess off the table once and for all. Or if he was responsible, I want to find that out. This is beyond frustrating. I'm sick and tired of being yanked around. And if there is a written account from a dying man, I want to see it. And I want to know if Cindy's sister was indeed an eyewitness to Mr. X's alleged confession on that day at Beech Lake. And if the woman who made the anonymous phone call to Jerry Hartsfield mentioned in the 1997 article is still around, she needs to come forward as well. Because this is not the same woman that I talked to that started me down the briefcase path. My source didn't get her information from her ex-husband until 2006. This is bordering on ridiculous at this point, and it's time for everyone to man up.
Okay, so, and here's what disappointed me the most about this episode is that everybody who heard it, my parents included, were confused by it. And it's the Mr. X, Mr. Y crap. Had I given the names at this point, this wouldn't have been confusing. I don't think as confusing. So I go into this thinking this is a Pete Hill lead, okay? And I find this anonymous call thing that Hartsfield got back in the day. And I was like, well, let me try. Let me try to see if anything ever came of that. No, I don't even think I knew it was a Pete Hill thing at that point. It was just somebody who called anonymous tip and said they knew. They knew. I should have known what happened to Casey. So, we all know Hartsfield is a Burns guy. That's his guy. That's who he thinks did it. So then he says, Pete, you could have knocked me over with a feather. Because, that's where we are now, man, And I'm like, all right, here we go, Well, it turns out the call he's talking about is later, not the call that I read in the article back in the day. Totally different person. But what? I'm not saying this is a lie, man, okay? Oh, maybe I'm not saying it's a lie. I'm saying it's untrue. But what is it that they say about lies, that a lie walk around the world before the truth has a chance to put its boots on? This person contacted him in 2006 in Canada about Mark Burns. That just shows you how this Mark Burns thing, even today, will not die. Just will not die, right? But this, and another thing too, I want to make the point too. Now, I've earned the right to poo-poo the Mark Burns theory, okay? Because I wasn't like this when I was doing this, right? I was open to it all. I've earned that right now because I have chased down so many Mark Burns stories. I'm going to tell this story because I don't think this ended up in the podcast, because at this point, this might have even been later than this, I was so done with Mark Burns. I had somebody call me from Florida, okay, and argue with me that there were pictures of Casey that Mark or his minions took, put them in a wall behind the sheetrock in a house in Trenton. And then they were renting the house. And then the house was going to be sold. So they scrambled and got the pictures out of the wall and buried them in the yard. And this person from Florida could tell me exactly where in the yard to start digging to find these pictures. And at this point, I was done. I was like I am now. And I'm like, I'm sorry. That doesn't make any sense. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. They're there. I swear they're there. And it was one of those stories where he had about 1,500 people helping him. And then there was photographic evidence. And they almost got found out. So they moved him out of the wall and put him into the ground. So my question was, why don't they just destroy the photographs? So first of all, you're telling me, because there was like 5 or 6 people, you're telling me this many people have damning evidence on Mark Burns and they just keep moving it around and hiding it different places. Yep. That's what I'm telling you. Why doesn't somebody just burn the damn photographs? This is very similar. Written innocuously on the back of some receipt or something kept in this briefcase. But here again, look at the detail in this. Look at the trouble to call Hartsfield in Canada. You got the law enforcement suspicion angle thing. I don't trust anybody down here. I'm going to have to call the former guy who's not even in the country anymore. And there's a briefcase. And it's got the evidence written in the briefcase. So I have earned the right to poo-poo Mark Burns stories at this point, especially after this one and the photographs in the wall. This is like some cloak and dagger kind of spy movie stuff. It's written in a briefcase, and the man's been sitting on this information for 15 years and doesn't even know he has it. Break the case wide open. Stay tuned on the next Unsolved Mysteries. Give me a break, man. Give me a break. Like, investigative wise, this episode pisses me off. Pissed me off. I'm cool now. I've had 5 years to cool off. Pissed me off, man. You know, talk about a waste of resources of time. I was broke as a goose doing this back then. I was driving from Meaden, Tennessee, which is 8 miles south of South Jackson, trying to get to Milan. That's an hour drive, man. If not more. Driving on fumes and ambushing this guy on his front porch about his dead brother's briefcase. It makes for a great listening episode, except for the X and Y thing getting confused. But, you know, long story short, I thought it was going to be a Pete Hill lead. It turned into a Mark Burns nothing burger. But it made for it was a great episode as far as like just showcasing. Okay. See, if you don't get how outrageous these Mark Burns stories are by now, you're never going to get it. That's why when people send me messages about, I know it's Mark and blah, blah, blah. I don't even respond to them anymore. I've earned that right. I'm a jerk when it comes to that. I have to be. Because I lost time and money. I'll never get that time back in my life. But at least the episode is one of my favorites as far as mystery and suspense. But what really ticked me off is that who I mentioned in the end of that. I've been trying to get Cindy's sister on board too. And she was telling me a lot of stuff off the record. And that's why when I found out she was involved in this Beech Lake thing, it really surprised me because she was like, nah, the Mark Burns thing's not, you know. And then I got ghosted, man. And right now, you're starting to see the end. There's some filler episodes where I have some guests on and do some things. And then, you know, there's a good one. I think it's the one I end on. And at that point, I'm like, we've taken this as far as we can go. This is where the trail ends. It ain't gonna get no better than this as far as from a podcast perspective. Otherwise, I mean, I could have dragged this thing out and chased down 15 more. Seriously, that's not hyperbole. 15 more Mark Burns leads. But I mean, I'd be wasting your time, my time. It might make for one hell of a mystery show, but that's entertainment is second to finding out the truth. Like I said, I don't want it to be a dud either. I mean, I want earballs on it, man. I want people to be listening to it. I want it to be, you know, and again, because of my creative side, I want it to be, I don't want to say a piece of art. That sounds too buffy, but it needs to be something you're proud of, man, you know? Where it ticks all the boxes, where, you know, it wasn't a slog to listen to, and it also got some answers, you know, that's what you want. Anyway, guys, I don't even know what's next. There's some filler stuff in there I'm not going to do any revisited things on. But I'll see you on the flip side for the next one. Thanks.